When Eleanor Hayes anonymously submitted a groundbreaking algorithm that saved Vertex Technologies from a catastrophic data breach, she never imagined she was rescuing the career of Alexandra Reeves, one of the country's most influential tech CEOs. With her beloved family farm slowly suffocating under mounting debt and her father's medical treatments draining their savings, Eleanor returned home one evening to find an elegant business card tucked under her door and discovered that the powerful executive had launched a desperate search for the mysterious coding genius who had disappeared without claiming credit for averting a billion-dollar disaster. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Eleanor Hayes' fingers flew across the weathered keyboard of her outdated laptop. The screen's glow illuminating her focused expression as she worked on debugging a complex piece of code. At 32, Eleanor's face carried the gentle tan and fine laugh lines of someone who balanced outdoor work with intense concentration. Her lean frame shaped by years of physical labor on her family's farm rather than deliberate exercise. The soft, evening light filtered through the window of her modest home office as she worked, but Eleanor barely noticed the time passing. A lifetime in rural Vermont had taught her to make the most of every available moment. "Just one more error to fix," she murmured to the screen, addressing the security protocol she was refining. "Almost there." From the kitchen, she heard the familiar sound of her border collie Sadie's paws clicking across the hardwood floors, followed by two sharp barks. Through the window, Eleanor spotted her younger sister Olivia's car pulling into the gravel driveway of Havenbrook Farm. Eleanor stretched, wincing slightly as her shoulders protested. Years of dividing her time between tending to the farm and pursuing her self-taught programming passion had taken their toll, though she'd never complain about it, especially not to Olivia, who had left farm life to become an elementary school teacher in Burlington, 40 miles away. "Should have known I'd find you glued to that computer," Olivia called as she entered through the kitchen door, setting down a bag of groceries. At 28, Olivia shared the Hayes family features, the same intelligent hazel eyes and determined chin. But her hands lacked the calluses of farm work, her shoulders unburdened by the weight of preserving a struggling family legacy. "Code doesn't debug itself," Eleanor replied with a small smile, closing her laptop. Despite occasionally envying her sister's more conventional career path, there was no resentment between them. Olivia had offered numerous times to contribute financially to the farm's upkeep, but Eleanor's fierce independence had always prevented her from accepting. The sisters moved through the farmhouse kitchen with the easy familiarity of a lifetime shared under one roof. The 1890s farmhouse had been in the Hayes family for 4 generations. Its yellow clapboard exterior needed repainting, and the wraparound porch had a slight sag on the eastern corner. But to Eleanor, it represented everything worth fighting for. "Tea's fresh," Eleanor said, reaching for 2 mugs from the cabinet. The kitchen was modest but warm and inviting, with the original pine floors her great-grandfather had installed and the sturdy maple table that had hosted family meals for nearly a century. Olivia settled at the table, while Eleanor poured steaming herbal tea into 2 handmade ceramic mugs. The kitchen walls displayed family photographs chronicling the farm's history. Eleanor and Olivia as children collecting eggs from the henhouse. Their mother standing proudly beside her award-winning organic vegetables. Their grandparents with the farm's first tractor. Most prominent was a sepia-toned photograph of their great-grandfather Thomas Hayes standing before the newly purchased farmland in 1925. "How's Dad doing?" Olivia asked, her voice softening as she mentioned their father. Eleanor's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Good days and bad days. Today's been better. He's resting now." She set the mugs down, avoiding her sister's concerned gaze. The unspoken truth that their father's good days were becoming increasingly rare hung in the air between them. Raymond Hayes had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease 3 years earlier, and the progression was steadily robbing him of his independence. "And how are the fall preparations coming along?" Olivia asked, referring to the farm's upcoming harvest season. "We're on track. The heirloom apples are looking promising this year." Pride briefly lightened Eleanor's expression. Havenbrook Farm had become known regionally for its heritage apple varieties, a niche market Eleanor had developed to keep the farm viable in an era of agricultural consolidation. "People at the farmers' market still don't know about our financial situation?" Olivia asked carefully. Eleanor shook her head. "No need for them to worry. I'm handling it." Olivia wrapped her hands around the warm mug, her expression growing serious. "And the specialist in Boston? Any news?" Eleanor stared into her tea. "The treatment program looks promising, but—" She trailed off, the unspoken reality of their financial situation hanging in the air between them. Their father's condition had steadily worsened over the past year. The local doctors had done their best, but the tremors, rigidity, and balance issues had progressed despite standard medications. A movement disorder specialist in Boston had recommended an innovative treatment protocol involving specialized physical therapy and an experimental medication regimen, but their insurance wouldn't cover the unproven approach, and the out-of-pocket costs were staggering. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "You didn't drive all this way just to ask about Dad," Eleanor said finally, recognizing the hesitant expression that had settled on her sister's face. Olivia sighed. "Janet Matthews from First Vermont Bank was at our school career day yesterday. There's talk about your loan extension." Eleanor's jaw tightened. She'd hoped to have more time before word spread. Burlington might be the largest city in Vermont, but with just over 42,000 people, news traveled quickly, especially bad news about one of the county's oldest farming families. "My business with the bank is private," Eleanor said more sharply than she'd intended. "Not in a town this size," Olivia countered. "Ellie, if you're in trouble again, let me help." Eleanor stood and moved to the window overlooking her orchards. The heirloom apple trees stood in neat rows, their branches heavy with fruit approaching harvest time. The rare antique varieties, which commanded premium prices from specialty markets and high-end restaurants, represented her best hope of balancing the farm's precarious finances while still covering their father's ongoing medical expenses. The truth Eleanor couldn't bring herself to share was that Havenbrook Farm was 3 months behind on its mortgage. The bank had granted extensions based on the projected yield of the fall harvest, but their patience was wearing thin. The most recent statement from the neurologist sat unopened on her desk alongside brochures about the treatment program in Boston that remained financially out of reach. "You know," Olivia said carefully, "the offer still stands. Mark and I have that money from selling my condo before we moved in together. We could—" "No," Eleanor cut her off firmly. "I told you before, I'm not taking your savings. This farm has been in our family for 4 generations. It's my responsibility now." Olivia ran a hand through her hair in frustration. "It's not just your responsibility, Ellie. It's consuming you. When's the last time you did anything for yourself? The farm was never meant to be a burden." Eleanor remained silent. How could she explain to Olivia that the farm wasn't a burden, but her purpose? That despite the hardships, the equipment breakdowns, the rising costs, the unpredictable weather, she still felt the same connection to this land that had sustained their family through the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and countless personal challenges. The Hayes family perseveres. That's what their grandmother had said countless times during Eleanor's childhood. Those words had carried her through the dark days after their mother's death, through their father's diagnosis, through the mounting medical bills, through the lonely nights when the enormity of preserving both her father's health and her family's legacy threatened to overwhelm her. "The apple harvest looks exceptional," Eleanor said, finally changing the subject. "Best crop I've had in years. Premium quality that should fetch top dollar. If the weather holds, I should have enough to cover the mortgage and put something toward Dad's treatment." Olivia looked skeptical, but didn't press further. She knew her sister well enough to recognize when a subject was closed. Instead, she reached into her tote bag and withdrew a small wrapped package. "Early birthday present," she said, pushing it across the table. "I found it at that antique shop in Burlington." Eleanor unwrapped it carefully to find a leather-bound journal, its cover soft with age and embossed with delicate botanical designs. "It belonged to a female botanist from the 1930s, Olivia explained. "The shop owner said she documented heirloom plant varieties throughout New England. I thought it might have some insights for your apple preservation work." Eleanor ran her finger along the journal's spine, emotion tightening her throat. Inside, meticulous handwritten notes and sketches documented apple varieties, many of which she recognized as those growing in her own orchard. "This is incredible," Eleanor managed, carefully opening the fragile pages. "Some of these varieties are nearly extinct now." "I knew you'd appreciate it," Olivia said, pleased by her sister's reaction. They talked for another hour about Olivia's third-grade class, about their father's upcoming doctor's appointment, about Eleanor's plans to expand her cider production. What remained unspoken was their shared fear that Eleanor might be the last Hayes to work this land, that a legacy spanning nearly a century might end on her watch. After Olivia left, Eleanor returned to her computer, losing herself in the complex world of code that served as both escape and potential salvation. Few people in her rural community knew that behind her reputation as the quiet apple farmer lay a self-taught programming prodigy. Eleanor had discovered coding in high school and had pursued it relentlessly through online courses, open-source projects, and countless hours of practice. When their mother died suddenly 6 years ago and their father needed more support, Eleanor had abandoned her plans to pursue formal education in computer science, instead channeling her talents into freelance work she could do from home while managing the farm. Over time, she had built a modest reputation in specialized cybersecurity, circles under the pseudonym Orchard Shield, keeping her real identity private to maintain the boundary between her two worlds. "You should be resting," came a gentle voice from the doorway. Eleanor turned to find her father standing there, leaning on his walker. At 68, Raymond Hayes remained tall and dignified, despite the disease that had begun to bend his frame. His hands trembled slightly, but his blue eyes remained sharp and observant. "Just finishing up a project," Eleanor said, closing her laptop and rising to help him to the comfortable armchair she'd placed in her office specifically for him. "How was your nap?" "Good enough," Raymond replied, settling into the chair with her assistance. "I heard Olivia's car. Sorry I missed her." "She'll be back on Sunday," Eleanor assured him. "She brought groceries and news from town." Raymond studied his daughter with the perceptive gaze that had always seen through her attempts to shield him from worry. "And the bank loan, was that part of the news from town?" Eleanor sighed, perching on the edge of her desk. There was little point in trying to protect her father from financial realities. He had managed the farm's books meticulously until his condition had made the detailed work too difficult. "Janet's been talking," Eleanor admitted. "The bank's getting anxious about the mortgage." Raymond reached for her hand, his fingers curling around hers with surprising strength. "The harvest looks good. Premium quality. That's what you told Olivia." "Then we'll be fine," Raymond said with a certainty Eleanor wished she could share. One good harvest and we'll be back on track. Eleanor nodded, unwilling to dampen his optimism with her own doubts. Instead, she changed the subject. I had an interesting opportunity come up today. A security forum I contribute to occasionally posted about a potential vulnerability in a major tech company's infrastructure. I think I might have a solution. Raymond's face brightened at this news. Though he didn't fully understand the technical aspects of Eleanor's programming work, he had always encouraged her passion for it. That sounds promising. Is it paid work? Eleanor hesitated. Not exactly. It's more of a challenge, but solving it could lead to connections that might bring in more freelance contracts. What she didn't share was that the company in question was Vertex Technologies, one of the largest tech corporations in the world, and that the vulnerability, if exploited, could expose sensitive data for millions of users. The security forum had been abuzz with speculation about whether Vertex even realized the danger they were facing. "You should pursue it," Raymond said firmly. "Your mind is too extraordinary to be confined to just apples and soil." Eleanor smiled at her father's unwavering support. "I can do both. The Hayes family perseveres, right?" "And adapts," Raymond added, a familiar twinkle in his eye despite his fatigue. "Your great-grandfather didn't survive the Depression by doing things the same old way. He innovated. You come by your dual talents honestly." They sat together as dusk fell over the orchard, the peaceful moment, a rare respite from the worries that defined their days. As darkness approached, Eleanor helped her father back to his room, each step measured and careful. Later that night, after Raymond had taken his medication and fallen into restless sleep, Eleanor sat at her desk with the farm's financial ledger open beside her laptop. The columns of figures told a story as clear as any family photograph. Havenbrook Farm was sinking, weighed down by the dual anchors of agricultural economics and catastrophic medical expenses. Eleanor turned to a fresh page in the ledger, beginning yet another round of calculations. If the apple harvest yielded as expected, if the premium varieties commanded top dollar, if the cider production increased as planned, if the bank granted one more extension, if her father's condition stabilized, if her life had become an equation of uncertainties, a desperate mathematics of hope against probability. She closed the ledger with quiet resignation and turned back to her computer screen. The security vulnerability at Vertex Technologies beckoned, a puzzle to solve, a distraction from financial worries, and perhaps, though the chance seemed vanishingly small, an opportunity to make a difference in a realm far removed from her struggling farm. Eleanor worked through the night, her fingers dancing across the keyboard as she methodically analyzed the vulnerability and crafted an elegant solution. By dawn, she had created a security patch that not only addressed the immediate threat, but strengthened the entire system against similar future attacks. She submitted her work anonymously through the security forum, using only her Orchard Shield handle, and closed her laptop just as the first light of morning touched the apple trees outside her window. Tomorrow would bring a new day, new tasks, new problems to solve. The Hayes family had weathered droughts, floods, market crashes, and personal tragedies. They would weather this too somehow. As exhaustion finally claimed her, Eleanor's last conscious thought was of her grandmother's favorite saying, "Roots run deeper than troubles." Eleanor only hoped the old woman had been right. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect early autumn day that reminded Eleanor why, despite everything, she had never regretted her choice to remain on the land her ancestors had settled. She rose after just a few hours of sleep, as she had nearly every day since childhood, moving through her morning routine with practiced efficiency. Coffee brewing, chickens fed, equipment checked, and a hearty breakfast prepared for her father, who needed the nutrition even when his medication diminished his appetite. While Raymond slept, Eleanor reviewed the day's tasks. The eastern orchard needed final preparations for next week's harvest. The barn roof had developed a leak during the last rainfall, and the irrigation system required maintenance before the forecasted dry spell. Each task represented not just work to be done, but another link in the chain connecting her to the generations of Hayes farmers who had tended this land before her. As Eleanor stepped onto the porch with her second cup of coffee, the farm's ancient landline phone rang, an unusual occurrence so early in the morning. The caller was Martin Campbell, her nearest neighbor, whose organic vegetable operation adjoined Havenbrook Farm to the west. "Eleanor," Martin's voice came through with unusual urgency, "just wanted to give you a heads up. The Weather Service revised their forecast. That storm system they thought would miss us is changing course. Could hit us hard tomorrow night." Eleanor thanked Martin for the warning, her mind already shifting to storm preparations. Early autumn storms could be devastating to an apple crop just days from harvest, potentially destroying months of work in a single night. After checking on Raymond, who was awake but having what he quietly described as "not one of my better" mornings, Eleanor left him with a breakfast tray and promised to return soon. She spent the next 2 hours securing equipment that might be vulnerable to high winds and checking the integrity of the supports for her heaviest-bearing apple trees. She was reinforcing a particularly vulnerable section of heritage trees when her phone rang. The screen showed Olivia's name, unusual for this time of day, when her sister was typically teaching. "Everything okay?" Eleanor answered immediately, alert to the possibility of trouble. "Just checking on you," Olivia replied, her tone concerned. "They're broadcasting storm warnings for the county. How are things looking from your end?" "Manageable so far," Eleanor said, surveying the orchard from her position. "I'm reinforcing the supports for the older trees. Should hold unless things get dramatically worse. Need an extra pair of hands? School's out early for teacher conferences and I could drive up." Eleanor hesitated, her instinct to handle problems alone warring with practical necessity. "Actually, that might be helpful. Dad's having a rough morning, and I don't want to leave him alone too long with all this prep work needed." "I'll be there in an hour," Olivia promised, the relief in her voice making Eleanor realize how rarely she accepted her sister's offers of assistance. After hanging up, Eleanor returned to the house to check on Raymond. She found him seated in the living room chair near the window, his tablet computer open to a digital book. Before his illness, Raymond had been an avid gardener, his experimental grafting techniques for apple trees earning recognition throughout Vermont's agricultural community. Now he read about horticulture when his hands were too unsteady for practical work. "Storm's coming," Eleanor informed him, trying to keep her tone casual. "Olivia's driving up to help secure things." Raymond looked up from his tablet, immediately alert to the implications. "How bad?" "Nothing we haven't handled before," Eleanor assured him, though the truth was more nuanced. The forecast warned of unusually high winds that could devastate an orchard on the verge of harvest. As she turned to leave, Raymond set down his tablet, studying her with the same perceptiveness that had seen through her evasions for over 3 decades of fatherhood. "Be careful," he said simply, "both of you." Eleanor squeezed his shoulder gently. "Always am. My phone's in my pocket if you need anything." By the time Olivia arrived, the wind had already begun to strengthen, rustling through the apple trees. With concerning force, the sisters worked efficiently together, securing vulnerable equipment and reinforcing supports for the heaviest laden trees. As noon approached, they paused briefly to assess their progress. "I think we've done everything we can for now," Eleanor said, wiping sweat from her brow despite the cool air. "Let's check on Dad and get some lunch." They were heading back to the house when Eleanor's phone chimed with an email notification. She almost ignored it, but something made her glance at the screen. The sender's address made her stop in her tracks. "What is it?" Olivia asked, noticing her sister's sudden stillness. Eleanor stared at the screen in disbelief. "It's from the security division at Vertex Technologies. The big tech company. What do they want with you?" Eleanor hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Remember that coding project I mentioned? I submitted a security patch to fix a vulnerability in their system. I used my pseudonym, but somehow they've traced it to my email." Olivia's eyes widened. "Is that bad? Are you in trouble?" "I don't know," Eleanor admitted, opening the email with trepidation. The message was brief and formal, from Vertex's chief security officer. "To Orchard Shield, your security patch has prevented what our team now recognizes would have been a catastrophic data breach. Our CEO, Alexandra Reeves, has requested a personal meeting to discuss your work and potential collaboration opportunities. Please contact me at your earliest convenience to arrange details. Highest regards, Marcus Chen, CSO, Vertex Technologies." Eleanor read the email twice, unable to process its implications. Vertex Technologies was a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Alexandra Reeves was a household name, one of the most powerful women in the tech industry. And they wanted to meet with her, a self-taught programmer running a small apple farm in rural Vermont. "This is incredible," Olivia breathed, reading over Eleanor's shoulder. "You have to respond." Eleanor shook her head, pocketing her phone. "Later. Right now, we have a storm coming and trees to secure." "Ellie," Olivia protested, "this could be huge. Vertex Technologies could probably pay you more for one consulting job than you'd make in 5 apple harvests." "And what about Dad? The farm? I can't just drop everything because some tech giant finally noticed one of my patches." Olivia's expression softened. "No one's saying drop everything, but at least respond to the email. See what they're offering." Eleanor nodded, reluctantly, promising to consider it after they'd finished the storm preparations. But privately, she was already formulating a polite but firm refusal. Her two worlds, farming and programming, had always remained separate by her choice. The thought of bridging them, of exposing her quiet rural life to the scrutiny of Silicon Valley executives, filled her with deep unease. They worked through the afternoon, securing the farm against the approaching storm. By dusk, they had done everything possible to protect the vulnerable apple crop, though Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that nature would have the final say, as it always did in farming. After a simple dinner with Raymond, whose spirits seemed lifted by Olivia's presence, Eleanor finally retreated to her office to address the email from Vertex. She drafted a brief professional response, thanking them for their interest, but declining the meeting, citing prior commitments. Her finger hovered over the send button for several long moments before she finally pressed it, feeling a strange mixture of relief and regret. She was closing her laptop when Olivia appeared in the doorway, a steaming mug of tea in each hand. "You turned them down, didn't you?" she asked, setting one mug on Eleanor's desk. Eleanor nodded, unsurprised by her sister's intuition. "It's not my world, Liv. I'm a farmer who happens to code, not a coder who happens to farm." "You're both," Olivia countered, settling into the chair across from Eleanor. "Always have been. Remember when you rigged up that automated watering system for Mum's greenhouse in high school? You've never had to choose between your talents." Eleanor sipped her tea, avoiding her sister's gaze. "The farm needs me. Dad needs me, especially now." "And what about what you need?" Olivia asked softly. Before Eleanor could respond, a powerful gust of wind rattled the windows, as if nature itself was punctuating Olivia's question. The sisters exchanged concerned glances. "It's starting earlier than forecast," Eleanor observed, rising to check the weather radar on her laptop. "This doesn't look good." The storm system had accelerated, now projected to hit with full force around midnight rather than the following morning. The wind was already strong enough to worry Eleanor, and the heaviest gusts were still hours away. "We should secure anything." "We missed," she said, already reaching for her jacket. "And check on the eastern orchard again. Those trees are the most vulnerable." Despite Olivia's protests that they should wait until morning, Eleanor insisted on a final inspection round. The sisters ventured out into the strengthening wind, flashlights cutting through the darkness as they checked tree supports and equipment. They had just reached the eastern orchard when disaster struck. A powerful gust tore through the trees, and Eleanor heard the sickening crack of breaking wood. A large branch from one of the oldest trees had snapped and was threatening to tear down an entire section of carefully nurtured heritage apples. "Hold the flashlight!" Eleanor shouted to Olivia over the wind, already moving toward the damaged tree. If she could secure the branch before it fell completely, she might save not just this tree, but the surrounding ones as well. The wind howled around them as Eleanor climbed carefully onto the low stone wall that bordered that section of the orchard, reaching for the dangling branch. Her fingers had just closed around the rough bark when another violent gust hit, stronger than the last. Eleanor felt her footing slip on the rain-slick stones. She heard Olivia scream her name as she fell backward, a sharp pain exploding through her ankle as she landed awkwardly on the uneven ground. The next few minutes passed in a blur of pain and frustration. Olivia helped Eleanor back to the house, practically carrying her the final distance as the storm intensified around them. By the time they reached the safety of the kitchen, Eleanor's ankle had swollen dramatically, and she couldn't put any weight on it. Raymond, awakened by their commotion, appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face pale with concern, as he took in his elder daughter's condition. "What happened?" he demanded, moving forward as quickly as his walker would allow. "She fell trying to save a tree," Olivia explained, helping Eleanor into a chair and carefully elevating her injured ankle on another. "I think it might be broken." "It's just a sprain," Eleanor insisted through gritted teeth, though the throbbing pain suggested, "Otherwise, I'll be fine by morning." "You need a doctor," Raymond said firmly, his parental authority momentarily overriding his physical limitations. "This isn't something you can just walk off, Eleanor." "The hospital's 40 minutes away in good weather," Eleanor protested. "And I'm not leaving the farm in the middle of a storm?" "Then we'll call Dr. Patterson," Olivia decided, already reaching for her phone. "He still makes house calls for emergencies." Despite Eleanor's objections, Olivia made the call. Dr. Patterson, who had been the Hayes family physician for over 20 years, promised to come as soon as it was safe to drive. In the meantime, they applied ice and elevation, Raymond keeping watch over his stubborn daughter while Olivia made them all tea. "The eastern orchard," Eleanor said suddenly, looking out the window at the howling darkness. "If that branch comes down completely—" "There's nothing you can do about it tonight," Raymond interrupted gently. "Some things are beyond our control, Ellie. You know that better than most." Eleanor fell silent, recognizing the truth in her father's words, but hating the feeling of helplessness that accompanied it. Her entire life had been structured around the belief that enough hard work, enough planning, enough sacrifice could overcome any obstacle. The thought that her beloved trees might be destroyed while she sat uselessly nursing an injury was almost unbearable. The storm raged throughout the night, rattling windows and howling around the old farmhouse like a living creature. Dr. Patterson arrived shortly after midnight, soaked and windblown but determined. His examination confirmed what Eleanor had been dreading: a fracture that would require a walking boot and strict limitations on weight-bearing activities for at least 6 weeks. 6 weeks? Eleanor repeated incredulously. "Doctor, the harvest starts next week. I can't be off my feet for 6 weeks." "You don't have a choice," Dr. Patterson replied, his tone gentle but firm. "Put weight on this too soon, and you could cause permanent damage. You need rest, elevation, and time to heal." After the doctor left, Eleanor sat in stunned silence, trying to process the implications of his diagnosis. 6 weeks of limited mobility during the most critical period of the farm's year. 6 weeks when every day, every hour of physical labor translated directly to financial survival. "We'll figure it out," Olivia assured her, squeezing her shoulder. "I can take a leave of absence from school. Mark can help on weekends. We'll get through the harvest together." Eleanor shook her head, fighting back tears of frustration. "You can't put your career on hold for this, Liv. And even with Mark's help, we'd need to hire at least 3 experienced workers to make up for me being sidelined. That's money we don't have." Raymond, who had been quiet during this exchange, cleared his throat. "There's another option," he said slowly. "The email from Vertex, if they're willing to pay for your expertise." "Dad, no," Eleanor protested. "I've already declined their offer." "Then undecline it," Raymond suggested pragmatically. "Tell them your circumstances have changed. See what they're offering before you dismiss it." Eleanor looked from her father to her sister, seeing the same concerned determination in both their faces. She had spent years protecting them from worry, making sacrifices without complaint, shouldering burdens alone. Now, with her mobility literally hobbled, she was being forced to consider alternatives she would have rejected outright just hours earlier. "I'll think about it," she conceded finally, exhaustion and pain eroding her resistance. "But not tonight. Tonight, I just need to rest." The storm continued through the night and into the following morning, finally easing around noon. As soon as it was safe, Olivia ventured out to assess the damage. She returned with mixed news. About 20 trees had suffered significant damage, including 5 of the rarest heritage varieties, but the majority of the orchard had weathered the storm intact. "It could have been worse," she reported, trying to sound optimistic. "Most of the crop is still viable." Eleanor nodded, trying to focus on this silver lining rather than the loss of trees her family had nurtured for generations. She was seated in the living room, her ankle elevated and throbbing despite the pain medication, when her phone chimed with another email notification. This one wasn't from the security division, but from Alexandra Reeves herself. "Ms. Hayes, or Orchard Shield if you prefer, I understand you've declined our invitation to meet, and I respect your decision. However, I feel compelled to share why this particular security patch matters so deeply to me and to Vertex. What you may not know is that the vulnerability you identified and resolved was not just a potential data breach. It was an active attack, in progress that had bypassed all our standard security measures. Our team estimates that without your intervention, the attackers would have gained access to our entire customer database within 12 hours, compromising sensitive information for over 40 million users and potentially ending Vertex's reputation. For secure handling of data, in simple terms, you saved my company. You saved the jobs of our 12,000 employees. And you did it without being asked, without recognition, and apparently without expecting anything in return. I don't know what your circumstances are or why you've chosen to remain anonymous. I respect your privacy, but I would be remiss in my duties, both as CEO and as a human being, if I didn't try once more to express my gratitude and explore how Vertex might properly acknowledge your contribution. Whatever your reasons for declining our original invitation, I hope you'll reconsider. My team can arrange a meeting at your convenience, whether in person, via video conference, or through any other medium you prefer. With deepest appreciation, Alexandra Reeves, CEO, Vertex Technologies. Eleanor stared at the screen, a complex mixture of emotions washing over her. The revelation that her security patch had prevented an active attack, rather than merely closing a theoretical vulnerability, changed the stakes considerably. She hadn't just submitted an interesting solution to a hypothetical problem. She had unknowingly saved a major corporation from a devastating breach. She was still absorbing this when Olivia entered the room, immediately noticing her sister's expression. "What is it?" she asked, crossing to Eleanor's side. Wordlessly, Eleanor handed her the phone. Olivia read quickly, her eyes widening. "Ellie," she breathed, This is incredible. The CEO herself is reaching out to you. Do you understand what this could mean?" Eleanor did understand, all too clearly. It could mean financial stability for the farm. It could mean avoiding her father's specialized treatment in Boston. It could mean hiring help for the harvest while she recovered. It could mean all the things that had seemed impossible just days ago. It could also mean exposure, attention, questions about how a reclusive apple farmer had developed the programming skills to outsmart sophisticated hackers. It could mean scrutiny she had spent years avoiding, a spotlight on the quiet life she had built at Havenbrook Farm. "I need to think," Eleanor said, taking back her phone. "This isn't a simple decision." "It seems pretty simple from where I'm standing," Olivia countered gently. "The universe just handed you exactly what we need, exactly when we need it most." Eleanor managed a weak smile. "Since when do you believe the universe intervenes in human affairs?" "Since my brilliant but stubborn sister fell out of an apple tree and finally has to accept help from someone," Olivia replied, dropping a kiss on Eleanor's forehead before heading to the kitchen to prepare lunch. Left alone, Eleanor reread Alexandra Reeves's email, trying to decide how to respond. The rational part of her mind recognized the opportunity being presented. Vertex Technologies could easily afford to pay her a consultant fee that would solve their immediate financial crisis. A single meeting, perhaps even conducted remotely, seemed a small price to pay for such a lifeline. Yet something held her back. The same instinct for privacy and self-reliance that had defined her approach to every challenge for years. Accepting help, even well-deserved compensation, meant acknowledging that she couldn't manage alone. It meant opening a door she had kept firmly closed between her two worlds. As the afternoon light shifted across the room, illuminating dust motes in golden beams, Eleanor found her gaze drawn to the family photographs on the mantel. Generations of Hayes farmers looking back at her, each facing their own challenges, each making difficult choices to preserve the land and the legacy. "What would you do?" she murmured to their silent images, knowing no answer would come. The decision, like so many before it, rested solely on her shoulders. But for perhaps the first time, Eleanor found herself truly considering a path she would have rejected outright just days earlier. The storm, her injury, Alexandra Reeves's email, all converging to force a reckoning with her fiercely guarded independence. After a restless night filled with weighing options and calculating outcomes, Eleanor made her decision. With the morning light streaming through her bedroom window, she composed a careful reply to Alexandra Reeves. She explained that due to unexpected circumstances, she would be willing to consult with Vertex Technologies, but only remotely and under specific conditions. Her identity would remain confidential beyond essential personnel. Compensation would be discussed directly with the CEO, and the arrangement would be short-term. She hesitated before adding a final note mentioning her background in sustainable agriculture, a small bridge between her separate worlds. Within an hour, Eleanor received a response from Alexandra Reeves herself, agreeing to all conditions and suggesting a video conference that afternoon. "I appreciate your willingness to reconsider," the CEO wrote, "and I'm intrigued by the agriculture reference. There may be more synergy between our worlds than either of us initially realized." When Eleanor shared her decision with Raymond and Olivia over breakfast, their relief was palpable. "You're doing the right thing," Raymond assured her, his hand steadier than usual as he reached for hers across the table. "Not just for the farm, but for yourself," Olivia nodded in agreement. "This doesn't mean you're abandoning anything, Ellie. It's just adding another dimension to who you already are." The rest of the morning passed in a flurry of preparation. Despite her protests, Olivia insisted on helping Eleanor set up a more professional backdrop for the video call, rearranging her office to showcase the antique desk that had belonged to their great-grandfather, while keeping family photos and farm references out of camera range. "Remember," Olivia coached, as she helped Eleanor dress in a simple but professional blue blouse, "you're not just some anonymous coder to them anymore. You're a consultant they desperately want to work with. Own your expertise." Eleanor nodded, though her stomach churned with nerves. In all her years of programming, she had never spoken directly with clients, preferring the anonymous efficiency of digital communication. The thought of facing Alexandra Reeves, whose image regularly appeared in business magazines and technology conferences, made her palms sweat and her mouth go dry. At precisely 2 p.m., Eleanor's laptop chimed with an incoming video call. Taking a deep breath, she clicked "Accept." Alexandra Reeves appeared on screen, her trademark silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her expression both professional and warmly curious. At 45, she had become known not just for her technical brilliance, but for her unique leadership style that emphasized human connection alongside innovation. She sat in what appeared to be a home office rather than Vertex's gleaming corporate headquarters. "Ms. Hayes," Alexandra greeted her with a genuine smile, "or would you prefer Orchard Shield in this context?" "Eleanor is fine," she replied, her voice steadier than she expected. "Thank you for accommodating my conditions, Ms. Reeves." "Alexandra, please. And accommodation implies sacrifice. There's none on our part. We're simply grateful you've agreed to speak with us." She leaned forward slightly. "Before Marcus joined to discuss technical details, I wanted to personally thank you. What you did wasn't just solve a coding problem. You preserved trust for millions of users who rely on our services." The sincerity in Alexandra's voice caught Eleanor off guard. She had expected corporate politeness, perhaps even some condescension, from a tech leader toward a self-taught programmer. Instead, she encountered genuine gratitude and respect. "I was just doing what anyone with the right skills would do," Eleanor demurred. Alexandra's expression turned thoughtful. "That's where you're wrong. Our security team includes dozens of highly trained professionals with the right skills. None of them spotted what you did, and from what Marcus tells me, your solution wasn't just effective, it was elegant, almost beautiful in its simplicity." Eleanor felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected praise. Before she could respond, Alexandra continued, "But I'm equally intrigued by your mention of sustainable agriculture. That's not a background we typically see in cybersecurity experts." "It's a family business," Eleanor explained carefully. "I run an organic apple orchard that specializes in heritage varieties. Programming has always been a parallel interest." Alexandra's eyes lit with genuine interest. Heritage apples and cutting-edge code, an unusual combination, but one that clearly works. In fact, it's precisely that kind of cross-disciplinary thinking that created your security solution. You approached our system from a perspective none of our traditional security experts considered. The conversation shifted as Marcus Chen, Vertex's chief security officer, joined the call. A soft-spoken man with precise language and sharp eyes. He walked Eleanor through the technical aspects of what had happened. The attempted breach had been sophisticated, targeting multiple system vulnerabilities simultaneously. Eleanor's patch had not only closed the immediate threat, but had restructured the security architecture in a way that made similar attacks far more difficult in the future. "We'd like to offer you a 3-month consulting contract," Marcus concluded after their technical discussion. "Remote work, flexible hours, focusing specifically on resilience architecture for our user data systems, with compensation commensurate with the value you've already provided," Alexandra added. "Marcus will send the formal offer, But I wanted you to know that it includes an immediate security consultation fee for the work you've already done, separate from the ongoing contract." Eleanor listened, mentally calculating what this could mean for Havenbrook Farm, for her father's treatment, for getting through the harvest with her injured ankle. The numbers Alexandra mentioned, casually, as if they weren't life-changing, would solve their immediate financial crisis and provide breathing room they hadn't had in years. "I'd need to maintain my daily responsibilities here," Eleanor said cautiously, "especially with harvest season approaching." "We anticipated that," Alexandra nodded. "The contract is structured for approximately 20 hours weekly, scheduled at your convenience. We're interested in your expertise, Eleanor, not in disrupting your life." After discussing a few more details, they ended the call with plans to finalize the agreement the following day. Eleanor sat motionless for several minutes after the screen went dark, processing what had just happened. A door had opened. One she had kept firmly shut for years, and she had chosen to step through it, if only partially. When she shared the details with Olivia and Raymond, their jubilation confirmed she'd made the right choice. "This changes everything," Olivia exclaimed, carefully hugging her sister to avoid jostling her injured ankle. "With this kind of financial cushion, we can hire harvest help, pay down the mortgage, and still have enough for Dad's treatments in Boston." Raymond's eyes shone with a mixture of pride and hopeful tears. "I always knew your mind would take you places, Ellie. I just never expected it would be while keeping your feet planted right here on Hayes soil." Over the next few days, Eleanor settled into a new rhythm. Mornings were devoted to orchard management, directing. Olivia and the two experienced pickers they'd been able to hire with the security consultation fee Vertex had already paid. Afternoons and evenings were spent on her laptop, diving deep into Vertex's security architecture, identifying vulnerabilities and designing more resilient systems. To her surprise, she found the work deeply satisfying. Alexandra had assembled a small, specialized team that worked directly with Eleanor, treating her insights with remarkable respect despite her unconventional background. No one questioned her expertise or her methods, and the flexible schedule truly allowed her to balance both worlds. A week into the arrangement, Eleanor received an unexpected video call from Alexandra outside their scheduled meeting time. "I hope I'm not interrupting farm work," the CEO began apologetically. "Just reviewing harvest projections," Eleanor assured her, curious about the unscheduled contact. Alexandra looked uncharacteristically hesitant. "I have an unusual request. Our annual Innovation Summit is next month in Boston. Typically, it's a gathering of our top engineers, key investors, and strategic partners. This year, in light of the security situation you helped resolve, we're placing special emphasis on creative approaches to data protection." Eleanor felt a flicker of apprehension, sensing where this was heading. "We'd like you to deliver a keynote address," Alexandra continued. "Your unique perspective, combining agricultural systems thinking with security architecture, represents exactly the kind of innovative approach we're highlighting." Eleanor's immediate instinct was to refuse. Public speaking, especially to a room full of tech industry elites, was far outside her comfort zone. But before she could decline, Alexandra added something that made her pause. "The summit coincides with your father's scheduled evaluation at Massachusetts General, according to the treatment schedule you mentioned. We would, of course, arrange accommodations suitable for both of you and ensure transportation between the medical center and the event." The thoughtfulness of this consideration, remembering Raymond's treatment needs and integrating them into the invitation, caught Eleanor off guard. It revealed a level of personal attention she hadn't expected from a CEO managing thousands of employees. I don't have experience with public speaking," Eleanor admitted. and I've always kept my programming work separate from my identity. Here in Vermont. Alexandra nodded understandingly. Privacy concerns are completely valid. We can work with that, perhaps present as Orchard Shield, with biographical details limited to what you're comfortable sharing. As for the speaking experience, my team includes excellent coaches who could help prepare you. Could I have some and time to consider it? Eleanor asked. Of course, the summit is 6 weeks away. Take the weekend to think it over. After ending the call, Eleanor sat in contemplative silence, weighing this unexpected opportunity against her ingrained preference for anonymity. The speaking engagement itself terrified her, but the practical benefits were undeniable. Having accommodation and transportation arranged in Boston would significantly ease the logistics of Raymond's medical evaluation. When she discussed it with her family that evening, their responses were predictably divided. Absolutely not, was Olivia's immediate reaction. You've already stretched way beyond your comfort zone with this consulting work. A keynote address in front of industry leaders? That's too much to ask. Raymond, however, was quietly supportive. Consider what you might gain beyond the practical benefits, he suggested. Sometimes the greatest growth comes from facing what frightens us most. Eleanor spent the weekend torn between these perspectives, all while coordinating the early harvest work from her forced position of limited mobility. The irony wasn't lost on her. Physically confined to the farmhouse while contemplating a step that would expand her professional reach far beyond anything she'd previously imagined. By Sunday evening, she had made her decision. She would accept Alexandra's invitation, but with specific conditions to protect her privacy and ensure her father's comfort during the Boston trip. When she communicated this to Alexandra the following morning, the CEO's response was both gracious and practical, immediately addressing each of Eleanor's concerns with thoughtful solutions. "We'll make this work on your terms," Alexandra assured her. "And Eleanor, thank you for trusting us with this step. I believe it will benefit both Vertex and your own professional journey, perhaps in ways neither of us can yet envision." The following weeks passed in a blur of parallel activities. The apple harvest proceeded with unexpected smoothness thanks to the experienced workers they'd hired. Eleanor's remote work with Vertex deepened her unique approach to security architecture, earning increasing respect from the technical team. And in her limited free time, she worked with Vertex's communication coach, gradually developing a presentation that conveyed her security insights without revealing too much of her personal story. As her ankle healed and her mobility improved, Eleanor found herself viewing Havenbrook Farm with fresh eyes. The orchard's heritage varieties, preserved through generations of careful grafting and cultivation, represented a different kind of security architecture, one designed to maintain biodiversity against the vulnerabilities of monoculture farming. The parallel between her two worlds, once kept rigidly separate, began to feel less like a contradiction and more like complementary aspects of the same core values. 3 weeks before the summit, during one of their regular video meetings, Alexandra mentioned something that caught Eleanor's attention. "Our agricultural technology division has been following your heritage apple preservation work with great interest," she said casually. "The genetic diversity you're maintaining has significant implications for climate resilience in food systems." Eleanor blinked in surprise. "You've been researching my farm?" Alexandra smiled apologetically. "Not invasively, I hope. Your orchard's participation in the Northeast Heirloom Apple Consortium is public information. Several of our agricultural data scientists have been studying the consortium's approach as a model for resilient biological systems." This revelation, that her farming work had been noticed and valued by Vertex's scientists, shifted something fundamental in Eleanor's perspective. Her two worlds weren't merely parallel paths she happened to walk simultaneously. They were interconnected in ways she hadn't fully appreciated. I'd be interested in hearing more about that research, Eleanor said carefully. After the security project is completed, of course. I'll arrange it, Alexandra promised. Our AgTech team would be delighted to connect. As the summit approached, Eleanor's nervousness about public speaking was gradually overshadowed by a growing sense of purpose. The presentation she had developed with her coach focused not just on the technical aspects of the security solution, but on the cross-disciplinary thinking that had inspired it. Without revealing too much of her personal background, she found ways to incorporate agricultural metaphors that made complex security concepts more accessible. The day before their departure for Boston, Eleanor sat with Raymond on the farmhouse porch, watching the late afternoon light gild the apple trees with warm gold. The main harvest was complete, the heritage varieties carefully picked and stored. According to their specific requirements, Olivia and Mark had promised to oversee the weekend farm stand and manage the property during their absence. Nervous about tomorrow? Raymond asked, noting his daughter's contemplative silence. About your evaluation? Yes, Eleanor admitted, about the speech. Strangely less than I expected. Raymond smiled. Because you've realized it's not about performing for an audience. It's about sharing something valuable that only you can contribute. Eleanor nodded, touched as always by her father's insight. I keep thinking about something great-grandfather Thomas wrote in his journal during the Depression, how the farm survived because he was willing to graft new varieties onto established rootstock, innovation built on tradition. That's the Hayes family way, Raymond agreed. Roots and branches, stability and growth. You've always embodied both, Ellie, even when you tried to keep them separate. The following morning brought clear skies and cool autumn temperatures as they departed for Boston. Vertex had arranged for a comfortable car service that accommodated Raymond's mobility needs, making the journey as stress-free as possible. Eleanor had insisted on a hotel near Massachusetts General Hospital rather than the luxury accommodations where most summit attendees would stay, and Alexandra had readily agreed. Their first day in Boston was dedicated entirely to Raymond's medical evaluation. The movement disorder specialist, Dr. Keller, spent several hours conducting assessments and reviewing previous records. Her conclusions, delivered in the late afternoon, exceeded their most optimistic hopes. Mr. Hayes is an excellent candidate for our combined therapy approach, Dr. Keller explained. The progression pattern of his Parkinson's responds particularly well to the treatment protocol we've developed. With the right combination of specialized physical therapy and medication adjustments, we could significantly improve his quality of life. Eleanor, sitting beside her father in the consultation room, felt a wave of emotion so powerful she momentarily couldn't speak. They had been seeking this kind of hopeful prognosis for years, but the specialized treatment had always remained financially out of reach. Now, with the Vertex contract, it was suddenly possible. When could treatment begin? She asked, when she finally found her voice. We could initiate the protocol as early as next month, Dr. Keller replied. It would require an initial 2-week stay in Boston, followed by regular visits every 6 weeks. Much of the ongoing therapy could be coordinated with local providers in Vermont between visits. Raymond reached for Eleanor's hand, squeezing it with more strength than he had shown in months. His eyes conveyed what words couldn't: profound gratitude and renewed hope. That evening, back at their hotel, Eleanor found herself struggling with unexpected emotions. The breakthrough with Raymond's treatment should have been an uncomplicated joy, but it triggered complex feelings about the path that had led them here. "What's troubling you?" Raymond asked gently, noticing her distraction as they finished dinner in the hotel restaurant. "I can't help thinking about the strange sequence of events," Eleanor admitted. "If I hadn't been obsessively checking that security form the night before the storm, if I hadn't fallen and injured my ankle, If Alexandra Reeves hadn't been so persistent, if, Raymond finished for her with a small smile. That's the farmer in you, always calculating variables beyond your control. But don't you see the irony? For years, I've been determined to handle everything myself, to keep the farm going through sheer force of will. And then the solution comes from the most unexpected direction, from the programming work I've always treated as secondary. Raymond considered this thoughtfully. Perhaps the lesson isn't about which path was right or wrong, but about the strength that comes from having multiple paths available. The most resilient systems, as you often remind me when discussing the orchard, are those with built-in diversity. His words struck Eleanor with unexpected force. She had applied this principle religiously to her farming practices, diversifying apple varieties to ensure that no single blight or frost could destroy the entire crop. Yet she had resisted applying the same wisdom to her own life, treating her programming skills as merely a practical necessity rather than an equally valid part of her identity. "Tomorrow, when I give that speech," she said slowly, "I won't just be Orchard Shield, the anonymous security consultant, but I won't just be Eleanor Hayes, the apple farmer, either. I'll be both. Maybe it's time to stop seeing that as a contradiction." Raymond's eyes crinkled with pride. "That, my dear, sounds like wisdom hard won." The morning of the summit arrived with crisp autumn sunlight streaming through their hotel window. Eleanor dressed carefully in the outfit she and Olivia had selected. Professional, but understated, with a small apple blossom pin on her lapel as a private acknowledgement of Havenbrook Farm. The summit venue was impressively modern, a converted warehouse space in Boston's Innovation District. Alexandra met them at a private entrance, personally ensuring that Raymond was comfortably settled in the accessible seating area near the stage. Her attentiveness to these details, treating them as honored guests rather than merely a contractual obligation, further dismantled Eleanor's lingering wariness. "Nervous?" Alexandra asked as they waited in the small preparation room adjacent to the main stage. "Terrified," Eleanor admitted with a small laugh, "but also ready, I think." Alexandra smiled warmly. "That's the perfect combination." The audience is primarily engineers, investors, and technology partners, people who value authentic expertise over polished performances. Just share your insights as you've done in our team meetings, and they'll be captivated. When the moment finally came, Eleanor walked onto the stage with her heart pounding, but her steps steady. The spotlight was initially blinding, obscuring. The hundreds of faces she knew were watching. She took a deep breath, centering herself as she had practiced, and began to speak. "Security architecture," she began, "is fundamentally about resilience in the face of the unexpected. In nature, the most resilient systems are those that embrace diversity, redundancy, and adaptive response, principles I've applied both to cybersecurity and to heritage apple cultivation." As she continued, her initial nervousness gradually melted away, replaced by the confidence that comes from sharing genuine expertise. She moved through her presentation with increasing ease, using agricultural metaphors to illuminate complex security concepts. The audience, initially curious about this mysterious Orchard Shield consultant, became visibly engaged, nodding and taking notes as she explained how cross-disciplinary thinking had helped identify vulnerabilities that traditional approaches had missed. From her position on stage, Eleanor could see Raymond in the front row, his face shining with pride. Beside him sat Alexandra, her expression a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal warmth. The sight strengthened Eleanor's resolve to fully inhabit this moment, to acknowledge both aspects of her expertise not as separate identities, but as interconnected facets of a whole self. As she concluded her presentation to enthusiastic applause, Eleanor felt a profound shift in her perception. The barriers she had so carefully maintained between her worlds hadn't protected either one. They had only limited her own recognition of how each enriched the other. In combining her programming insight with agricultural wisdom, she had created something uniquely valuable, something that had not only saved Vertex Technologies from a devastating breach, but had opened a path to Raymond's improved health and Havenbrook Farm's continued legacy. The revelation wasn't that she needed to choose between being a farmer or a programmer, but that her strength lay precisely in being both. Like the heritage apple trees she tended, with modern varieties grafted onto ancient rootstock, Eleanor Hayes was most resilient when honoring both her traditional roots and her innovative branches. The applause following Eleanor's presentation continued longer than she had anticipated, washing over her in waves that felt both affirming and slightly overwhelming. As she stepped away from the podium, Alexandra joined her on stage, extending her hand in a gesture that transcended mere professional courtesy. "That," Alexandra said into the microphone, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium, "is exactly the kind of innovative thinking that defines the future of technology. Not isolated expertise, but the powerful synthesis of diverse knowledge. Systems." Eleanor felt a flush of pride warm her cheeks as she accepted the handshake, nodding her thanks to the audience before making her way off stage. In the wings, several members of Vertex's security team waited to congratulate her, their technical questions and enthusiastic comments confirming that her presentation had resonated deeply with the people who understood its implications best. "You were magnificent," Raymond told her when she finally made her way back to the audience seating area. His eyes shone with emotion, and his hands, usually trembling, were steady as they grasped hers. "You spoke with such clarity and conviction, like you were finally allowing your whole self to be seen." Before Eleanor could respond, they were approached by a distinguished-looking woman with silver hair and keen eyes behind stylish glasses. She introduced herself as Dr. Leila Patel, head of Vertex's Agricultural Technology Division. "Your presentation was illuminating from both security and agricultural perspectives," Dr. Patel said, her tone reflecting genuine interest rather than mere politeness. "I'd love to discuss your heritage apple preservation work in more detail when you have time. The genetic diversity maintenance strategies you mentioned have fascinating parallels to our digital resilience models." Eleanor exchanged contact information with Dr. Patel, surprised by the immediate professional connections forming from her dual expertise. This pattern continued throughout the lunch reception that followed, as various summit attendees sought her out. Some interested in her security insights, others curious about her agricultural background, and many intrigued by the intersection of these seemingly disparate fields. Late in the afternoon, as the summit's first day drew to a close, Alexandra found Eleanor and Raymond enjoying a quiet moment on the venue's outdoor terrace overlooking Boston Harbor. "I hope the day hasn't been too exhausting," she said, addressing Raymond with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Not at all," Raymond assured her. "Watching Eleanor shine like that could keep me energized for days." Alexandra smiled warmly before turning to Eleanor. "I've had an idea I'd like to discuss with both of you, if you're open to it. No pressure for an immediate answer." "Of course," Eleanor replied, curious about the CEO's slightly hesitant approach, unusual for a woman known for her decisive leadership. "Our board has approved a new initiative focused on agricultural data security," Alexandra explained. "The timing is coincidental, but your presentation today highlighted exactly why this work is crucial. As farming becomes increasingly connected, from IoT sensors in fields to supply chain tracking, the security vulnerabilities multiply exponentially." Eleanor nodded, having witnessed this trend even in her relatively traditional farming community. More farmers were adopting digital tools, often without understanding the potential risks. We're looking for someone to lead this initiative, Alexandra continued. Someone with deep understanding of both agricultural systems and security architecture. Someone who can build a framework that protects agricultural data while respecting the practical realities of farming operations. The implication hung in the air between them, clear but unstated. Eleanor felt her heart rate quicken as she processed the magnitude of what Alexandra might be suggesting. "Are you offering me a position?" she asked carefully. Alexandra nodded. A newly created role, Director of Agricultural Security Systems. It would involve developing security protocols specifically designed for agricultural technology, from small family farms to large operations. The position would be structured to accommodate your commitment to Havenbrook Farm, primarily remote work with quarterly visits to our Boston office. Eleanor glanced at Raymond, whose expression reflected her own mixture of surprise and cautious interest. "This isn't a spur-of-the-moment offer," Alexandra assured them, noting their reaction. "We've been considering this initiative for months. Your work with our security team these past weeks, combined with your presentation today, simply confirmed what we hoped, that you possess the unique combination of skills and perspective this role requires." "I'm honored," Eleanor said sincerely, "but also overwhelmed. This would represent a significant shift from my consulting arrangement." "Take time to consider it," Alexandra replied easily. "The summit continues tomorrow, and I know you have your father's follow-up appointment afterward. Perhaps we could discuss it further when you've had a chance to process everything." After Alexandra departed, Eleanor and Raymond sat in contemplative silence, watching the fading sunlight glint off the harbor waters. The day had brought revelations neither could have anticipated. First, the promising medical prognosis, now this unexpected career opportunity. "What are you thinking?" Eleanor finally asked her father, whose thoughtful expression revealed little of his inner reflections. "I'm thinking about something your mother used to say," Raymond answered softly. "That life's most important turns often come disguised as ordinary days." He turned to meet her gaze directly. "Today wasn't ordinary by any measure, but I believe it may well be one of those pivotal turns for you and for Havenbrook Farm." "You think I should accept the position?" Eleanor asked, somewhat surprised. Raymond had always been supportive of her programming work, but had also emphasized the importance of maintaining the farm's legacy. "I think you should consider what this opportunity might mean, not just for you, but for the future of farming itself," Raymond replied thoughtfully. "Security is becoming as essential to agriculture as soil and water. Who better to shape that emerging field than someone with soil under their fingernails and code in their mind?" His perspective shifted something in Eleanor's thinking. She had been viewing Alexandra's offer primarily through the lens of personal, career advancement, a framework that naturally triggered her instinct to prioritize the farm above professional opportunities. But if she reframed the position as an extension of her commitment to sustainable agriculture, a way to protect not just Havenbrook Farm, but countless family operations facing similar digital transitions. "I need to sleep on it," she concluded, "and discuss it with Olivia too. This would affect all of us." That evening, after ensuring Raymond was comfortably settled in their hotel room, Eleanor made a video call to Olivia. Her sister listened intently as Eleanor recounted the day's events, from the successful presentation to Raymond's promising medical prognosis to Alexandra's unexpected job offer. "First of all, I'm not at all surprised you wowed them with your presentation," Olivia said, her pride evident even through the digital connection. "Anyone who's ever heard you explain grafting techniques to visitors at the farm stand knows you're a natural teacher." Eleanor laughed. "Teaching farmers about apple varieties is quite different from addressing tech executives about security architecture." Is it, though? Olivia challenged gently. In both cases, you're translating complex systems into understandable concepts. The audience changes, but your gift for explanation doesn't. This observation gave Eleanor pause. Perhaps the boundaries she had so carefully maintained between her worlds were more permeable than she had realized. As for the job offer, Olivia continued, what does your instinct tell you? That's the problem, Eleanor admitted. My instinct is divided. Part of me sees this as an incredible opportunity to influence agricultural security on a broader scale than I ever imagined. Another part worries about balancing this responsibility with the farm's needs, especially during harvest seasons. Would you still be able to maintain your role at Havenbrook? Alexandra specifically structured the position to accommodate that, Eleanor explained. Primarily remote work, quarterly visits to Boston, the salary. She paused, still. Processing the figure Alexandra had mentioned would more than cover hiring additional farm help during my busiest periods with Vertex. Olivia's expression grew thoughtful. Remember last spring when you were agonizing over whether to expand the cider production? You said something that stuck with me. The best way to preserve tradition is to make it viable in the present. Eleanor remembered the conversation well. They had been discussing whether introducing modern processing equipment would compromise the heritage techniques their mother had valued so highly. This sounds like another version of the same question, Olivia suggested. Can embracing this new role actually strengthen your ability to maintain Havenbrook's legacy rather than diminish it? The question resonated deeply, challenging Eleanor's assumption that accepting the position would necessarily mean compromising her commitment to the farm. What if instead it represented an evolution of that commitment, extending the Hayes family's agricultural tradition into new territory while simultaneously securing the financial future that would allow the physical farm to thrive? The following morning brought the summit's second day, filled with panel discussions and networking opportunities. Eleanor found herself approaching these interactions with new confidence, no longer feeling like an imposter in the technology space, but as someone with valuable cross-disciplinary insights to contribute. During the lunch break, she received a text message from Alexandra. No pressure on the job decision, but I'd like to introduce you to someone this afternoon who might provide helpful perspective. Meet in the East Lobby at 3 p.m. Intrigued, Eleanor agreed. When she arrived at the designated meeting point, she found Alexandra waiting with an elegant woman in her early 60s, whose confident bearing and practical attire suggested someone comfortable in both executive suites and outdoor environments. Eleanor, I'd like you to meet Victoria Chen, Alexandra said. Victoria is the founder of Vertex Technologies and has served on Vertex's board for the past 5 years. She's also a third-generation rice farmer in California's Central Valley. Victoria extended her hand with a warm smile. Alexandra tells me you're considering a position that would bridge your technological expertise with your farming background. I thought my experience might be relevant, as I've walked a similar path. Over coffee in a quiet corner of the venue, Victoria shared her story of maintaining her family's rice farm while simultaneously building an agricultural technology company. She spoke candidly about the challenges of balancing these responsibilities, the resistance she sometimes faced from traditional farming communities, and the profound satisfaction of creating technologies that addressed real-world agricultural needs. The most valuable agricultural innovations come from people who understand farming from the inside, Victoria emphasized, not from technologists who view agriculture as simply another market to disrupt, but from those who recognize the wisdom embedded in traditional practices while seeking to enhance their resilience through thoughtful technology integration. Her words struck a powerful chord with Eleanor. articulating a philosophy that aligned perfectly with her own approach to both farming and programming. Here was living proof that her dual passions could coexist not merely as parallel tracks, but as mutually reinforcing elements of a cohesive life's work. How did your family respond when you started developing technology alongside farming? Eleanor asked, thinking of Raymond and Olivia. Victoria smiled. My father was initially skeptical. He valued tradition highly, but when he saw that my first irrigation monitoring system actually preserved water while improving crop yields, he became my biggest supporter. She leaned forward slightly. The key was demonstrating that technology could serve the farm's values rather than replacing them. By the time they parted ways, Eleanor felt a newfound clarity about the decision before her. Victoria had provided not just encouragement, but a practical model for how the path ahead might unfold, complete with realistic challenges and meaningful rewards. That afternoon, following Raymond's follow-up appointment with Dr. Keller, which confirmed the treatment plan and scheduled his first intensive therapy session for the following month, Eleanor met with Alexandra in the hotel's quiet lobby lounge. Raymond had retired to their room to rest, giving Eleanor space for this important conversation. Before I give you my decision, Eleanor began, I need to be completely transparent about my priorities. Havenbrook Farm will always come first, not just as a business but as a living heritage. The medical treatments for my father are non-negotiable, and I won't compromise on our sustainable farming practices even if more conventional approaches might be more profitable. Alexandra nodded, listening attentively without interruption. That said, Eleanor continued, I believe this position represents an opportunity to extend the values I've always applied at Havenbrook to a much broader context. If we can structure the role to accommodate these priorities, then yes, I would be honored to become Vertex's Director of Agricultural Security Systems. Alexandra's face brightened with genuine pleasure. I was hoping you'd say that. And your priorities align perfectly with what we envisioned for this position. We don't want you despite your commitment to Havenbrook Farm. We want you because of it. That living connection to practical agriculture is precisely what will make your security frameworks relevant and effective. They spent the next hour discussing practical details, reporting structures, project timelines, travel expectations, with Alexandra demonstrating remarkable flexibility in accommodating Eleanor's needs. By the time they concluded their conversation, Eleanor felt not the anxiety she had feared, but a growing excitement about the possibilities this new role might create. There's one more thing, Alexandra said as they prepared to part ways. This position comes with a signing bonus. I'd like to suggest that it might be directed toward implementing those irrigation system upgrades you mentioned for Havenbrook. Not as charity, she added quickly, noting Eleanor's expression, but as an investment in the farm that will continue to ground your insights in practical agricultural reality. The thoughtfulness of this suggestion, recognizing the farm's needs while framing support in terms of mutual benefit rather than one-sided assistance, further confirmed for Eleanor that she had made the right decision. Alexandra Reeves wasn't looking to extract her skills from their context, but to support the very foundation that made those skills valuable. The journey back to Vermont the following day carried a different energy than their trip to Boston, where uncertainty and apprehension had colored their departure. Their return was infused with newfound purpose and possibility. Raymond dozed peacefully for much of the drive, the positive medical prognosis having visibly lightened the burden of concern he had carried for so long. As they crossed the state line into Vermont, Eleanor found herself reflecting on the extraordinary chain of events that had led to this moment. From the anonymous security patch that had saved Vertex from disaster to the storm damage that had forced her to accept help. From her reluctant video call with Alexandra to her surprisingly successful presentation at the summit, Each step had seemed challenging or even unwelcome at the time, yet each had proved essential to the path now, opening before her. "We're almost home," she said softly, as Raymond stirred from his nap, the familiar green mountains visible through the car window. "Home," he echoed with a smile, "but with a broader horizon than when we left." When they pulled into the driveway of Havenbrook Farm, Olivia was waiting on the porch, waving enthusiastically. She had decorated the entrance with a colourful "Welcome Home" banner and arranged a small celebration dinner with Mark and two of their closest neighbouring farmers. As they gathered around the maple table that evening, sharing the news of Raymond's treatment plan and Eleanor's new position, the atmosphere was one of quiet jubilation, tinged with a sense of profound transition. Their neighbours, initially surprised by Eleanor's technology role, quickly recognized how her new position might benefit the entire agricultural community. "So, you'll be designing security systems specifically for farms like ours?" asked Martin Campbell, who had been gradually incorporating digital monitoring into his organic vegetable operation. "That's the core of it," Eleanor confirmed. "Creating protections that work with the realities of farm life, practical, affordable, and responsive to the actual needs of agricultural producers, rather than imposing urban tech solutions on rural contexts." "About time someone tackled that," Martin nodded approvingly. "Half the farm management software out there feels like it was designed by people who've never set foot in actual soil." As the evening progressed, Eleanor noticed Raymond watching her with a particular expression, pride mixed with something deeper, a kind of peaceful satisfaction she hadn't seen on his face since before his diagnosis. "What are you thinking, Dad?" she asked quietly when they had a moment alone in the kitchen. "I'm thinking about legacy," he replied, "about how we often imagine it in such limited terms, passing down land or buildings or traditions. But the Drew Hayes legacy has always been adaptation and innovation in service of core values." He gestured toward the dining room, where Olivia was animatedly describing Eleanor's presentation to Mark and their neighbors. "Your mother would be so proud of how you've expanded what's possible while keeping your roots firmly planted," Raymond continued, his voice soft with emotion. "And I couldn't be prouder of the way you've transformed what initially seemed like separate paths into a unified vision." The following weeks brought a whirlwind of activity as Eleanor established her new role at Vertex while simultaneously preparing Havenbrook Farm for the winter season. True to her word, Alexandra structured the position to accommodate Eleanor's agricultural responsibilities, providing advanced technology that allowed her to work remotely with unprecedented efficiency. Raymond's first intensive treatment session in Boston exceeded everyone's expectations. The specialized therapy, combined with medication adjustments, produced noticeable improvements in his mobility and reduced the tremors that had increasingly limited his activities. The Vertex position's flexible schedule allowed Eleanor to accompany him for these crucial appointments without compromising either her professional responsibilities or the farm's needs. A month after accepting the position, Eleanor hosted her first virtual workshop for small-scale farmers interested in improving their digital security. The session, organized through the Northeast Heirloom Apple Consortium, attracted participants from across New England, many of whom had initially been skeptical about technology but were increasingly recognizing its necessity as their operations evolved. "Think of digital security like crop rotation," Eleanor explained to the participants, using agricultural metaphors to make technical concepts accessible. "It's not about building an impenetrable fortress, but about creating resilient systems that can adapt to changing threats while maintaining productivity." The farmers' enthusiastic response confirmed what Eleanor had begun to understand during her presentation at the summit. Her unique value lay precisely in her ability to bridge these seemingly disparate worlds, translating between them in ways that honored the wisdom of each. As winter settled over Havenbrook Farm, bringing the quieter season that allowed for planning and reflection, Eleanor sat with Olivia in the farmhouse kitchen, reviewing the remarkable changes the past few months had brought. "Sometimes I still can't believe how drastically things have shifted," Eleanor admitted, warming her hands around a mug of cider made from their own heritage apples. "This time last year, I was calculating how many more mortgage payments we could make before foreclosure became inevitable. And now," Olivia prompted with a smile, "now the mortgage is current, Dad's treatment is showing real promise, and I'm developing security systems that might help hundreds of family farms protect their data and operations." Eleanor shook her head in wonder. "All because I couldn't resist solving a coding problem that wasn't even mine to solve." "That's where you're wrong," Olivia countered gently. "It was absolutely yours to solve, because you had the unique perspective needed to see what others couldn't. You just needed to stop compartmentalizing your gifts." Her sister's insight struck Eleanor as profoundly true. For years, she had treated her programming skills as separate from her farming identity, a practical necessity rather than an integral part of who she was. That artificial division had limited not just her professional opportunities, but her understanding of her own potential contribution. The following afternoon, Eleanor walked the dormant orchard with Raymond, whose steps were steadier than they had been in months. The bare apple trees stood like sculptures against the winter sky, their pruned branches revealing the careful shaping that would guide their spring growth. "I've been thinking," Eleanor said as they paused beside the oldest section of heritage trees, "about establishing a small technology hub in the old carriage house. Nothing that would change the character of the farm, but a proper workspace where I could potentially mentor young programmers from rural communities." Raymond considered this thoughtfully, creating a place where others might discover the same integration of traditional knowledge and modern tools that you found. "Exactly," Eleanor nodded, pleased that he understood immediately. "There are probably dozens of farm kids out there with technical aptitude who don't realize they don't have to choose between their agricultural heritage and their technological interests." "I think that's a wonderful vision," Raymond affirmed. "A natural evolution of what the Hayes family has always done, finding new ways to sustain what matters most." As they completed their circuit of the orchard and headed back toward the warmth of the farmhouse, Eleanor reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment of clarity and purpose. The anonymous security patch that had saved Alexandra Reeves' company had ultimately saved much more. Her father's health, Havenbrook Farm's future, and Eleanor's own understanding of her unique place in the world. The shy farmer, who had hidden her identity until the final day, had discovered that true strength lay not in maintaining rigid boundaries between her worlds, but in allowing them to inform and enhance each other. Like the heritage apple trees she tended so carefully, Eleanor Hayes had found that her deepest resilience came from honoring both her roots and her branches. The traditions that grounded her and the innovations that allowed her to grow in unexpected, magnificent directions. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.